Thanks, Chairman. Those of you who have election integrity responsibilities, in your testimony that I related to Mr. Polite, have made the case that there is a link between the large and fraudulent scheme to spread lies about the election and the threats and harassment that you and your colleagues have experienced. And I think that's a very important point that you made. I want to highlight it, and I want to thank you for it. I also want to flag that this appears to be happening not just at random. There seems to be organizational support for this. And I'll bring up a group called the Conservative Partnership Institute that has been described as a dark money MAGA hub and a full-service shop for pro-Trump Republicans. And this group is part of a network of, at this point, it's been determined 11 other groups that all are highly closely associated with one another, sharing addresses, sharing staff, on each other's incorporation papers. And also it involves a lot of the refugees from the Trump election insurrection effort. So you have Jeffrey Clark at one of these groups, the, hard for me to see it and the camera as well, the Center for Preserving America. And as we all know, his role was bad enough that the FBI did a raid at his home to seize his electronics. Kash Patel was at the Department of Defense, and we just know that on its way out, the Trump Defense Department wiped the phones of individuals who might have been texting about the January 6th insurrection effort. You've got Mark Meadows, who participated in the pressuring of Georgia officials and has now ceased cooperation with the January 6th panel. You've got Stephen Miller, who likely wrote President Trump's speech January 6th, inciting the mob to go to the Capitol and attack their nation's capital. And you have the lawyer Cleta Mitchell, who was on the phone with Trump for the Georgia call to the Secretary of State, where Trump pressured the Georgia Secretary of State to go out and find the right number of votes to flip the election. And the likely coordination of that effort with Jeffrey Clark's effort out of the Department of Justice is pretty obvious. So this is not happening in a vacuum. In fact, it's not even happening. It's being done. And the sooner we can draw attention to those who are doing it and why it's being done, the better. In essence, this is a giant pea and shell game with a dozen shells that can be pushed out to engage with the media or to engage politically, but all, it would appear, commonly controlled, all with funders who are kept secret, and all with murky relationships with one another and with the efforts to lead an insurrection against the popular vote in the last election. And where it comes to bear in this hearing is particularly with respect to Cleta Mitchell and her election integrity network. Because if what we are seeing is a deliberate strategy of fraudulent lying designed to whip up earnest and sincere popular antagonism. And by the way, if you're an American and you think that your American democracy has been stolen from you, that is something to get mad about. So if that's the lie that you're propagating, you've got a vulnerable population of people who don't want to believe that that happened and who would be angry if you can convince them that that happened. And then you turn them loose on the election officials. And guess what? If you can drive election officials out of their jobs, if you can drive election volunteers away from the polls, You then have vacancies. Vacancies that Cleta Mitchell is training to fill right now to pursue the interference with American elections that the January 6th riot kicked off. There is nothing about this, Mr. Chairman, that is random. And I hope that there will be investigations that are done, either civilly or otherwise, to connect these obvious dots, that there is a fraudulent lie, that it is deliberately propagated, that the propagation of that lie is intended to cause harassment and threats to election officials, which in turn is designed to cause vacancies in the legitimate election official ranks that can then be filled with never election denier cohorts. And I see a lot of heads nodding as I've been going through this. I apologize not to be able to ask a question given the shortness of time, but we have a thing in the Senate Judiciary Committee called a question for the record. So I invite the officials who have knowledge of this to respond to this in whatever way you please, and we can make your answers to that question for the record a part of the proceedings. If I may ask that, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.